Good afternoon, or I guess it's exactly noon. How's everybody doing? Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here today, the inaugural episode or session. I don't know.
What we did here.
We're still figuring it out, but man, we are so excited to have you all. Welcome to Black Dandelion. Thank you all so much. Before we dive into things, I just want to make sure that everyone is here for the reason that they were expecting to be here. We're going to talk a little bit today about a new album, some music by Arlo Parks called Collapsed in Sunbeams. Yodit and I don't know, yo.
Look, anything I can do with you, I'm gonna do. Like, I rocks with you, bro.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Yodit and I work together full time at a nonprofit here in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We also work together at another nonprofit here, part time together, and now we're starting this endeavor together.
Which started, come on, no, it started like 9 months ago.
I know. Yeah.
Right? I mean, we planted these seeds like 9 months ago, even though the idea for this podcast sparked yesterday. And y'all all came. You should tell the story, man.
Yeah, obviously, over the summer, there was a lot going on and a lot of activity, a lot of movement, right? And Yodit and I were in a lot of conversations together, just trying to process everything that was happening and find some space to kind of like heal and grow. And we latched on to like radical imagination as just kind of like the way forward, right? Like, how are we, if we are going to tear down old systems, we have to replace them with something new, right? And so what does that look like? Like, how are we even going to begin to do that? And just drawing so much inspiration from art and music, literature, really just like the culture. I mean, we touched base on like so much stuff over the course of the summer, just ranging from like Octavia Butler's work to Beyonce's incredible masterpiece that came out last summer,
Black is King, Angela Davis, like we were definitely leaning on like just the culture to get us through, right? I mean, Versus was its own thing. Like that was like that alone was something to latch on to, but like also how do we hold on to each other, knowing that like what we need doesn't really exist, right? And how could we move like from this space of abundance, right? Of like, and not lack, which is what oppression and white supremacy like prop up for us, right? Is all that we don't have. But I think, when I listen to you play the saxophone, or when you gifted us with your poetry this summer, or you even formed a band. I mean, we started using playlists in all our meetings. Like the culture was always there, but I feel like we all recognized we needed it more, right? More than anything our minds could conceive of, like the drum beat, the flows of the horn, our breath, the lineage of Black music and culture, like from the diasporic impact, right, is like a gift to us.
Yeah, it's like you and I were talking a little bit earlier, just kind of on like why we felt like doing this, like why this podcast, why, or whatever it is. And
y'all gotta tell us what it is. it like a podcast? Is it a webcast?
There's going to be some interaction too, you know, like we're going to do the bulk of the talking here, but we really want to hear from y'all too, you know, and whatnot. So just you know, figuring out the form, but I mean, like the why for us, right, is just like, this is a long journey, you know, like Till Justice is Real is a long journey that has been already centuries old, and, you know, who knows how much longer we have ahead of us. So we need to continue to be like fuel. We need fuel for the whole journey, you know. And we were kind of like that the art, the music, the culture has been that pitcher to replenish us, right? Like when we've just kind of been drawn out of, when there's kind of an emptiness.
Well, and in a sea of whiteness, which is true about our county and our country, like we can lose sight of, which is the metaphor of the Black dandelion, is like the seeds of Black excellence are spread across this globe, right? And they have always set us free. Our liberation has been tied to the liberation of others since the start of this country, and arguably with Africa as the cradle of civilization since the beginning of time, right? So we are spreading those seeds of excellence, and we're pushing back on a narrative that would make our experience myopic, that would make it, you know, try to shrink it, right? Or one that assigns culture to whiteness, which isn't a thing, right? Like that doesn't actually exist. So this is how we take up space, right?
Right. And like, and, you know, coming back to the dandelion too, just recognizing the ways in which, you know, the revolution is sparked in each of us with this work, right? You know, like the way that every seed that's scattered out there begets more seeds, right? And I think like that's the beauty and the power of kind of like the way that we share and the way that we connect, you know, is that continuance, right?
Yo, talk about the metaphor of the dandelion, though. We got to talk about permaculture.
I mean, come on, like the dandelion is a soil remediator. It has it breaks through with that taproot. It breaks through clay, rocky soil. Dandelions grow every and anywhere. You know what I'm saying? And they pull from the soil. They take out heavy metals and toxins, right? And then they make that soil better for the next thing that comes along, while also, like we said, you know, just like spreading it and propagating and making sure that, you know, like the growth continues and the healing continues, right?
That's right. That's right.
It's diasporic in and of itself. The way that it,
and y'all be thinking they weeds when you really need to be eating them dandelions.
Come on.
Poking them up.
That's bee habitat, friends. That's where it happens. So, so for us, you know, like this, I think this opportunity is one where we get to continue to sow and cultivate those seeds. And like, honestly, to be real with y'all, like it's also a place like, you know, Yodit and I, we bob together. So it's kind of just like a place for us to do a little healing and connecting and unpacking as well. And we're super excited and grateful to be able to share that opportunity with y'all.
Yo, and Monday through Friday, we be doing hard work, bro. Like, we need a little fun and play in the movement. Yes. Just to be clear, like I rock with you. Yo, I love you. Like I rock with you.
I mean,
you are like every good thing, man. Every good thing.
Yeah, it says something, I think, about the kind of community that we're in, that we can spend this much time together and not get sick of each other. And man, there are some, I am like looking at this beautiful array of faces and boxes on the screen here, and just like want to give 1,000 shout outs. We got, man, friends from all over the place here. Yo, I have to say, I have family from from like the frigid north up here, coming in. My aunt Julie and Uncle Steve are in the house, which is
all right.
My Aunt Tola's here, man. I appreciate her so much for being here. My friend Maddie is here from GR. Oh gosh, we got Detroit folks in the house, man. Matt,
Listen,
Mr. Matt Nahan is in the building.
don't
Shout
be
out
trying
to
to
him.
claim Matt as your friend. That's
Come on,
listen, Matt. You better tell Will. You better tell him how we go back.
Matt's
Let
been
me
knowing
see.
me. Look, Matt's been knowing me since this
We
show.
might go deeper, but Will and I go back farther. So
What?
maybe it balances out.
Okay.
Maybe
All
balance it
right.
out.
I see.
High
I
school,
see.
right? Like DCD style. Yeah.
What? Okay. Well,
Yeah.
let me shout out. Let me shout out a few of
Come
my.
on, get
Let
it,
me
yo.
shout out a few of mine. So I see my girl Janelle Johnson. Oh, love Janelle. Sister in the struggle. My family, John and Michelle Rodriguez, who will, by the way, I think kind of follow our footprint in all the work we do together.
I know. Yeah.
Listen, health coach extraordinaire. And if you haven't heard her podcast, Lisa Baker is killing the game out here talking about women and burnout. My girl, Lisa Gizzy, who just so dope and has such a heart for our people and our guts. She feeds us good vegan food. That sister, and takes care of chickens. Let me see. Oh, Jermaine Smith just did. If y'all didn't catch Jermaine,
Yo.
this with us.
Yo.
Love is the movement.
Oh my gosh, Jermaine killed it.
Oh, she killed it. She killed it. Oh, wait. And my sister Jessica Cunha is here. She's a fellow musician. That sister is bad. She's got a guitar finger but nobody's business.
Look, if we're talking musicians, we got Jenny Jones in the house.
Listen. Drew is here.
Drew is here. Aunt Tola Lewis is in the house. We got people. Come
on now. So we are so delighted that y'all are with us on this journey. We wrote our vision for a year out, so we got 25 episodes, y'all, ahead of us. And we hope you'll join us for every one of them. Tell them a little bit about our vision.
When we, like we said, this is kind of a labor of love, right? That has been in process for a while. So over the next year, we're really hoping to dive in. Like we said, we're setting a goal of 25 episodes, giving ourselves something to shoot for. But really, we want to talk about the culture. We're gonna focus heavily on music and the arts, but we're gonna discuss, albums and TV shows and articles and videos and tweets. And, if it's significant to the culture, if it's significant to Yodit and myself, we're gonna bring it up here. We want to be with y'all in the conversation. We're, like we said, we're nurturing a revolution here. And it's a quiet revolution, but it's the kind of revolution that sparks hearts and minds that goes out there and shifts. And shout out to Brian Johnson, who just stepped up into the room. He's another Black Dandelion brother, so we got to give him his cred. But Black folks, we are so happy you're here with us, and I'm just so excited to create some space for us to elevate the culture, to talk about the things that are coming up for us. Non-Black folks, we're excited to have you here too, and this is a healing journey, I think, for all of us, untethering ourselves from kind of the false narratives, the stereotypes, and just diving into the real experiences of ourselves and our peers and all that has to offer, right? When we think about radically imagining something new. I think what Arlo has to offer us in this this conversation, man, talk about coming from a place so different from, I think, where Yodit and I generationally came up, right? So much to offer that. And then, like I kind of said, this is Yodit and I. We're here to have a good time, to talk about the stuff that's coming up and then is sparking things for us. But really just kind of elevating the incredible work that's happening in the culture and in the diaspora to connect with you all.
I mean,
Yo,
you did that last week, which was really like pushed this over the edge. So I don't know if y'all caught it, but the Ann Arbor Area District Library invited Will and someone on staff at the library for this like hour, 10-minute session on To Pimp a Butterfly, Kendrick Lamar's album. And I was just in the audience, like Will didn't even tell us until the last minute, but to kind of witness this brother like unpack. If you've heard To Pimp a Butterfly, it's a really powerful kind of retrospective on Kendrick's evolution as an artist, as a Black man. You know, it's him examining like the ways in which we are both in the system, of the system, and trying to dismantle it, and the kinds of existential crisis that some of us that are in it are having, right? About like, what does that mean, you know? And I just thought Will did, Will and the other person whose name is escaping me, but she was a
Sherlanya Turner.
Sherlanya Turner. I just thought it was so important. I spend a lot of my time in these kind of heady spaces talking about, you know, diversity and equity and anti-racism and that sort of thing, but to humanize it through the culture, like through Kendrick's experience. Actually, shout out to Michelle Rodriguez, who's on too. She just recently published a chapter of a book that looks at Wakanda, the Black Panther movie, and how, and correlates it to mental health. So Will and I are certainly not the only ones. In fact, maybe Michelle will be a guest and talk to us.
Yeah, I'm like, I didn't know about this, Michelle, and now I'm a little upset about it, but it's okay. I know about it now. We're gonna have to circle back on that.
So it was just, you know, I've appreciated as I've gotten to know you through our regular work together, like all of these different identities that you bring, you know, some of which I'm aware of, right, that are more obvious, and others that I've learned about you over the years. And I thought you paid such homage to Kendrick in that moment, to like make him more than the Pulitzer Prize winner, or more than the, you know, Grammy winning artist, but to make him, you know, this whole human Black man who has all this dynamism and all these layers. So I think it would be good for us to tell the audience a little bit about who we are and the identities we bring. And I'm a little bit ahead of you on this because I have to, because you are like a really good musician and I'm not, I'm gonna go before you with a little bit of flow.
Okay. All right.
Because we're about the culture, right? And then
Culture.
Come on. So in responding to the prompt, like, who am I? Because we said we would share. So and where am I from, right? I'm from 7 Mile by way of Ethiopian roots. I'm from Suzuki's and bamboo earrings, at least 2 pairs. I'm from crack and hip hop. I'm from Black fight and Black flight. I'm from grandmothers who were first, from struggle and resistance. I'm from hot combs and gentle treatments and injera and Doro what. I'm from the only uncolonized land in Africa. I'm from mothers, many of them women. I'm from women's rights. I'm from single mamas. I'm from love. I'm from daddies never far away. I'm from the land of what up though. I'm from Black women who made, molded, fed, prayed over, laughed, nurtured, and even occasionally tapped my brown bottom to keep me in line, even when it was hard. I'm here to free and to be freed, to significantly change the conditions for Black and Indigenous people in my lifetime. I'm here to decolonize and indigenize and to dismantle white supremacy and the patriarchy. I'm here to honor my mama, the grandmothers, the ancestors, the children of the future, and to liberate the path for my children's grandchildren. I'm from love, and I'm here to give love and to model courage, strength, and vulnerability for me, for the human spirit, for us. I'm an aspiring vision doula, birthing our future and our purpose for our shared freedom. I'm unfuckwittable, unbossed, and unbothered, and I am aligned with the Creator. I need to give, and I need to be given grace, wholeness, and humanity. I am equally exhausted and inspired daily.
Come on.
What up, though? What up, though?
Yo. Yeah, you did that. Damn.
Who are you, my
Come
brother?
on. I'm still riding that one a little bit. Damn, that was awesome, yo. Ah. Well, I am currently trying to let my father into the room. So there's that. Oh man, that was so dope, yo. I hope you share that every time. Yeah, I am, I think like one of, yeah, I identify as a cisgendered straight Black man. I am an ancestor of William Tucker, the first African child born on American soil in 1619, or 1621. I am Marion and Foley's eldest son, and Jay and Malcolm's older brother. I'm Liz's husband, Daisy, Luna, and now Tia Beanie's doggy dad. And I come to this work as as a musician and a poet. Man, I like music is my heart. My Aunt Tola and Uncle John, who are here, like have played such a huge role in that and shaping that. And it is probably the way that I between music and food, those are the ways that I connect with the culture the strongest. Like I grew up in predominantly white spaces. I spent a couple of years as a very young child in Europe, so that has a very different, I was raised like in a different context, and my relationship to my Blackness is very different, I think, because of that. And so the opportunities to continue to connect and to explore that with you all, like through music and through art and through the culture. Like I said, it's both sparking revolution for others, but also like that work for me, like that healing for me. Yeah, I don't know. I'm most excited to talk about the stuff and less eager to talk about myself. So shoot, maybe we just get on to it.
Let's do it. Should we play a quick track again?
Oh man,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, especially as we're getting into it. So folks, the album that we're talking about today is called Collapsed in Sunbeams, and it is the first album by London-based artist Arlo Parks. And so before we like really get into that, I'll just share, like with me, my personal philosophy when it comes to this stuff, I don't spend too much time looking into an artist's history and into their background, because to me, like everything that they want to share is in the work, right? It's coming through in the work for me. So, but I do think that there's like some stuff to know, right? Like that's kind of helpful for grounding. So I'm only pulled these kind of things from from her sources. So according to her Facebook page, she is a London-based artist, songwriter, and poet. According to her website, in Arlo Parks' world, words are as useful as photographs. Luscious, expressive vignettes pepper the poetic lyrics in her sweet, ruminative indie pop songs. She's inspired by an eclectic mix of artists from Radiohead to Portishead and Sufjan Stevens to Solange. And then real quick from her Wikipedia, Arlo was born August 9th, 2000, which is a trip to say still, because that's like 10 years younger than me and I can't handle that. But also shout out because she's a Leo. And she has Nigerian, Chadian, and French heritage. So a little background there. And then this album was released last month. So January 29th, 2021, it is 12 tracks and 40 minutes. It is Arlo's first album. But yo, I think you did a little bit of other kind of research before we got on. Do you want to say a little bit about that? And then I'll play that opening piece.
Yeah, let me drop. Genius did like Will. I'm really mindful of critique of artists, and one thing I'm definitely not going to do is disparage Black women or Black artists online. So I'm mindful about where I gather information about them. So the link I just dropped in to Genius is like her voice and her intent around every song that, Will, I wasn't even hip to Arlo, like Will put me up on her, and she does use she, her pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
Will put me up on her, and I like fell in love, but then you know how like I need to listen to music over and over again to like get, to deeply connect with it. So I found that link and just really, and we'll talk about it more, but just some observations from sort of, how she talks about the motivation behind the song and some threads that we saw, I think will come up in the conversation for sure.
Yeah. All right. So I think we'll do this a little bit differently every time, but with this album in particular, I think it's important to begin with this opening piece because it really sets the tone, right? And so let's listen and then we'll talk about it real quick. Yeah. Wow. So, I think that's one of the reasons that this album is so striking to me and so kind of like important, right? I mean, we'll talk about like different pieces, over the course of this series, but I said this in the Kendrick when we were talking about To Pimp a Butterfly, that it's a specific and a particular type of album that begins with silence, right? And this one I feel very similar, right? It's a very soft on-ramp with the acoustic guitar and the like ethereal kind of music. And then she begins with a poem, right? And that is a signal like, hey, that this entire kind of like work has been thought about. It's not just a collection of songs that the record label said, let's package this up together and, push out because we have a deadline and you need to make us more money, right? But that it's something deeper, something more intentional. And wow, I mean, over the course of the next 11 tracks, like what she offers is something both extremely personal and yet very, I think, universal. And even in many ways spans generations, kind of like what we were talking about a little bit earlier. So there are specific lines of this poem that I want to talk about just briefly, but I want to give you a chance to share kind of like your reflection on just like that opening and how it hits.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a daughter of hip hop, and in many ways, hip hop was poetry to music, right? Mm-hmm. And so for me, although we tend to separate the two, they're siblings to me. Mm-hmm. And she said that she wrote the album as like a series of vignettes and also these kind of intimate portraits of her adolescence and the folks that had shaped it. And I felt that. It felt really personal to me. She uses a lot of folks' names, It feels, as she said, she intended it to both universal and hyper specific. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I had like three things right off the bat with that track. One was, you know, and maybe you can relate to this, like that kind of Black exceptionalism that can come along with, or that came, I'll speak in I, like that came along with having a particular experience as a Black person that didn't necessarily fit the kind of mainstream narrative or the myopic view of being Black here.
Mhm.
I love that she was like normalizing, like feeding the cat, you know, like that sort of thing, which I think that normalization is also, it humanizes us.
Mhm. Yeah.
She talked about trusting our bodies, which was a huge lesson for me. I see you smiling, jump
I
in
love
there,
that. Yes,
right?
go.
Yeah, yeah, right. I mean, some people know that like I was new in a role at work, and when the pandemic hit, and I didn't have, there's like no pandemic playbook, like, oh, this is how you manage through that. And so many of the choices that I made for our organization and for myself were like intuition, like, you know, evoked from questions of myself, like, what would my grandmother do? You
Right.
know, what would my mom do? And in that way, like trusting our bodies and trusting our intuition combats what she also, I think, alludes to, like the superwoman trope, you know, and particularly the myth of the Black superwoman.
Mm.
So I appreciated the invitation just in that onset of like, it's settled in my bones.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when you when you talk about those lines specifically, you know, like that thought of the Black superwoman kind of came to my mind too, because it was, you know, it just makes me think of the ways in which, at least on my timeline and the places where I see it, like Black women are increasingly the poster children for mental health, awareness, for counseling, right? And for normalizing that, right? And I think that that's connected to the ways in which our culture has always looked to Black women as like America's
the nurturers and the caretakers.
America's mom, you know, like our, not even our mom really, but yeah, you're saying like the for hire caretaker, the help. But we've done that, you know, Black people have done that, and Black women in particular have really been like the champions for our humanity in this nation, right? The champions for everyone's humanity in this nation. Like you were saying, like it's, when we think about who takes care of us, we think of our grandmothers, our aunts, our uncles, right? Or our aunts and our mothers. And so what does it mean for a 20-year-old?
Come on now. Come on, that baby is 20.
What does it mean for a 20-year-old to hold space like that? What does it mean for a 20-year-old to hold space like that, recognizing that so much of this album is directed towards her generation, and yet you and I have found so much resonance in it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I feel that way about you. I'm still quite a young woman, but wise, a little more seasoned, than you, my friend. I guess if I were going to draw a correlation between what you just said about the grandmamas and the aunties, like my grandma always saw me. And I think there's something to be said about the ways in which, if that has been your experience, that you pour that into others. So I'm here for Arlo. Also, I think generationally, like I find myself healing from and forgiving our ancestors for for the complexity of assimilation, right? That many of them assimilated because that was, and by assimilation, I mean into mainstream, into dominant culture, right? Into, and away from, you know, a purist, you know, liberation movement. But that was their form of survival. right?
Right.
And I feel like now, especially this past year, where young progressives are really challenging us. I'm gonna read this quick post, I haven't even decided, and somebody on this Zoom sent it to me, but I haven't even decided if I'm gonna post it, but I thought the shit was real. I was like, ooh. Somebody said, I want you to remember about this past week that mutual aid groups helped you more than your government. Remember that when people try to tell you that the most powerful thing you can do is vote, that's a lie. We've always had revolutionary potential in our community. We always help each other in the struggle. And I thought that was so spot on. And I also spent much of the fall like encouraging folks to get out to vote. And frankly, Black women put the election on our backs, right? But all of this to say, I'm glad my grandmother saw me. I'm glad she valued who I was. I'm glad I owe that to our next generations. It's our job. Like, part of being at this point in my life is that I'm clear that the vision will probably not be made manifest on my watch, but that I am connected to you and to Arlo and to our children's children. And the work we're doing now is to pass forward, right? In the same way that we got that from our grandmothers. And so Arlo, I think in a way that you talk about mental health, in a way, a lot of folks are silenced on mental health. Arlo puts it right in front of us. Right in front of us. And I think particularly compounded during the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
So
oh, yeah. Absolutely. And like
folks are suffering. She puts our suffering right in front of us.
Which I think is not unique to Black art, right? I mean, I can't remember who it was that said it, but somebody was like, if you are a rapper, you sell and market trauma, right? Like, 'cause that's what the masses want. And so in some ways, I don't think that that's new, right? Like, we've always kind of been putting it out there, but the way in which she goes about it, like,
y'all just smarter than us. Let's just say it. Y'all just smarter.
I don't necessarily think it's like smart, yo. I think it's this a cultural acceptance, right? That is, that kind of began with your generation, that trickled into mine, but is kind of flooding into Gen Z, where they understand empathy. They understand what empathy is, right? Like, they understand that it's not necessarily that you're always out here trying to fix somebody else's problems, but that you can sit with it and sit in it with them. And that is, right, like when we get like that track Hope, which we kind of like wrapped, our waiting period with, right? So, it's not my favorite song on the album. I'll just say that. Like, personally, I think her producers cheapened her out a little bit by that. Like, it's a minute too long. It should end with her spoken word. That should be the end. But it isn't. And at one point, what she says in there is, I cannot communicate the depth of this feeling. But I have it, and you're not alone. Right. And that just acceptance is not something that I think my generation was taught to do well. I think it's something that we were taught, but not well practiced in. And I think that particularly when it comes to mental health, to see like a young Black person, right, kind of championing that, when for so long there's been a stigma in our communities around mental health and around counseling, that, the opportunity, it feels like it's a door opening. And
an erasure too, right? Like, she also, I forget which song, maybe you can remind me, but she's openly bisexual, and she falls in love with someone who's straight, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think we can talk about mental health without talking about erasure. Like, when we can't be fully who we are, right? like how that has a impact on the soul, right? And not because she didn't express her love, like she's not erasing herself, right? But because of the collective, the we, right, who you know will make life, you know, difficult for the both of them, and the ways in which she's navigating that. You know, you can't, I mean, we talked about her age. I think something that's interesting here in Washtenaw County is we talk a lot about Black and Brown disparities. I do this too, right? Like we're trying to shine a light on it. What we talk less about, which is not as acute or doesn't have as much disparity, but is the rate of suicide among wealthy white kids here and opioid use. We had about, before the pandemic, where I think something like 10 kids had either taken their lives or had died to drug overdoses in like this really short span of time. And part of that is that's the great secret white folks keep up, right? Is the ways in which they're dying in a system of white supremacy as well, right? And so I think it's in, you know, it just strikes me like that, how important it is, how mental health is not like this thing that some people are afflicted with, you know, or some behavioral health issue. It is as endemic to the culture as, you know, some of the other things we've talked about.
And like that, so there's two songs that you're talking about there, right? Because she's got the one song, Green Eyes. Green Eyes, she's talking about like this girl that she liked, that they dated for 2 months, but you know, the relationship didn't go anywhere because of the societal pressure, right? And then there's the other song, Eugene, which is the one where she falls in love with a girl who's straight, like her best friend, right? And you know, so many things striking there, right? I mean, like, first of all, that Eugene tune, you know, there's so much in there that obviously, like, as a person who isn't gay, I cannot understand, but there is so much that I have in similarity with. You know, I shared like earlier that I was raised in predominantly white spaces, right? And overseas for a portion too. So when the first girl I ever had a crush on was when I was like 8 years old, right? And she was white because there were no Black kids around me. And I remember telling her that I liked her, and her response was, ew. And so that, you know, I mean, you're 8, right? So it was like, okay, well, maybe like just love is kind of still gross to some kids at that age, right? You know, you never kind of know where folks are landing. But the second girl that I had a crush on when I was like 9 or 10, I told her, and she told me that she couldn't like me back because I was Black, right? Just like said that to me, you know, without any malice, right? It was just an honest, like, it was like almost like a fact that she had confessed to me, so that I know what it feels like to be in that kind of like oppressive, almost like hidden, erased kind of space, and to like, you know, see that kind of interaction playing out, right? And be like, oh man, this sucks. And the thing that I think that is so remarkable about Arlo, in that Green Eyes song, she says, you know, couldn't hold my hand in public, felt like their eyes were judging our love and baying for blood, which is, you know, intense. I couldn't blame you. I could never blame you, darling. That's what she says after that. I could never blame you. Like,
right.
And what a, again, kind of like almost like transcendent response that is to such a deep personal pain, right? Of like I'm going through this incredibly shitty thing. And, you know, like you said, this is a 20-year-old Black woman. She is bisexual. She is of French and African ancestry living in London. So I can only just imagine that it hasn't all been sunshine
grins and giggles, right?
Right, you know, come on. And then for her to be sitting in recognition of, hey, like what's happening right now is actually something that's like bigger than us. This is a systemic failing, and I'm just on the receiving end of it. I'm not going to hold that against you. It's like, are you a saint?
Right. She's very contemplative. So Eugene is actually inspired by a poem she says she wrote at 3 a.m. on the night bus. And the poem goes a little like, Eugene keeps stars and split fruit between his ribs. An almost angel boy smoking loose blends, blending, worming his way into your heart. And what a heart, so soft that sometimes it hurts to beat. We've known each other for ages. The first time I came over, you grated ginger into a bowl, listened to my oldest pain, spoke like sugar water. I knew I loved you then. I'm still not quite sure in what way. Eugene bloomed like a complicated flower or an elegant lie. You borrowed his habit of effortless bruising and horrible charm. Everybody says you look beautiful together. His hair smells of spoiled peaches and boiled blood. I wear jealousy so unglamorously, it upsets my stomach. I see double, forgetting myself in the night. That's just it. She's deep. She wrote some stuff, you know? So like, she's got that empathy, but there's a consequence, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I wear jealousy so unglamorously, right? Because to be in this body, right? To be in this body is, I mean, there's a reason when I was coming up, Whoopi Goldberg had this comedy segment that she did where she put on this shirt, this white, like starched white linen shirt, but she wore it on her head and she would fling it around like it was blonde hair. It was meant to be a metaphor for that. Some of you may remember that piece. And, you know, it was so important to the culture for Whoopi to name the harm of and the double consciousness that we have of accepting our round hips, our full lips, our nappy hair, and being in a sea of straight, white, thin-lipped messages over and over and over again. And really, like, I don't want to be white, right? But I definitely, you know, I had that whole thing with M Live this past week, and one of the racist fools had the nerve to put, well, she's appropriating culture by having her hair blonde. And as much of BS as it was, Will, I did have to sit with like, yeah, there is something there, like Arlo is, right? Like we're sitting with, certainly when I dyed my hair blonde, I did it because it's fly as hell, right? Like I was not thinking about a white woman. I'm never gonna look like a white, but like there is, you know, there is something there, right? There is something that Arlo's grappling with that, again, I think is tied to our mental health when we can't, you know, process that stuff out loud, right? You know, when you're carrying those stories of two little white girls that you and I can't, right? Like that trauma, those cuts, that doesn't go away, right? Just because you evolve into the phenomenal man that you are. And yet this culture, right? It can't even hold that nuance and complexity.
Which, I mean,
Arlo is trying to.
And yeah, absolutely. Which is like that in the opening poem, coming back to collapse the sunbeams, right? Stretched out, open to beauty, however brief or violent. And like you said, like that, when I think of like a sunbeam and who's collapsed in it, I think of a cat. right? I think of like the ways that cats will sit in one spot for like 6 hours, and then the sun moves, and they're like, "Oh no, I have to get up for this," right? But stretched out, open to beauty, however brief or violent, right? Like that image of a body stretched out and open is so vulnerable to me. It's like, you know, my wife will tell you, like, I do not put myself into physical positions, like literally sitting down positions where I feel physically vulnerable. Like I'll have a hard time getting up, right? It's just like something that it is in my spine that I need to be ready, you know, kind of like all the time. And now what is this image? What kind of freedom is it for a Black person to stretch out in the sun, open to beauty, however brief or violent? Like, wow. That image is just, that is liberation to me in a way, you know, having that freedom to just be and not worry about the consequence because of the body that you're born into.
Right.
And again, what a gift that a 20-year-old is doing this, because, you know, honestly, like from a purely selfish perspective, because I'm older than her, that means that I have the rest of her life to look forward to.
Right.
As far as creation and content goes, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is just the beginning for me. Great. But wow. And then she says, I see myself ablaze with joy, right? And right back to that beautiful violence of, you know, like a blaze, a fire, like it is temporary, but it is so glorious. And it is both like creative, right? It creates heat, it creates safe, like that is the evolution of humankind is rooted in that fire, and yet it destroys us at the same time. So what does it mean to be ablaze with joy? Wow. You know, like there's just so, like you were saying, there's just like so many layers of that like pain and triumph and humanity just wrapped up into what essentially comes down to like a 12 to 16 line poem at the beginning, you know? That whole track is like what, 55 seconds or something like that? It's not even a minute, you know, but it's not even.
Yeah. Did you have a favorite song on the track?
I you know, I had a couple, and it's really interesting because I think the ways in which they're my favorites are weird.
Okay.
So,
we'll play a little bit of one and then let's talk about it. Just play a little bit of
I'm gonna play one of my favorite songs, probably like the one that's weirdest to me for being my favorite, which is the tune Caroline. Track number 5 here. That song, man, the reasons that I like it, right? Which is so weird. First of all, like there's just like something 100% 90s about that sound. And it has to do with the open isolation of that electric guitar playing what is effectively the beginning of Weird Fishes by Radiohead. One of their most iconic songs, right? So that strumming or that pick pattern, like everything about that is just kind of like, man, this album, they just like took 90s pop, indie pop, took 90s like, you know, London R&B, like that whole Sade, all of it is just like coming into this album, mixing and okay, so I love that. And then I love a song that tells a story. And this one, I think in particular, leverages Arlo's poetic brilliance, right? She is, like you said, you know, like she described it on her website, and like you were saying, like it's photographic, the way that she describes a scene. In the second verse, her eyes blind with disappointment, I couldn't recognize her face. Shards of glass, they know this feeling, right? And when you hear it with like, you know, within the flow of the music, it's almost immediate for me. The way that you can like, the way that I picture a person's face shattered, right? After just like this devastating interaction with a loved one. So there's some like, it doesn't feel unique to Blackness. It doesn't feel unique to her generation. It doesn't feel unique even, I think, to like a woman's experience. It feels very universal to me. And then, yeah, that Caroline, like that's just such a fun. So she did that one for me. That unexpectedly brilliant, I think.
Jenny put in the chat, and I kind of had this thought too, like whether or not the couple or ex-couple like end up listening to this track.
That's exactly what I think about too.
You know, and also like that kind of voyeuristic piece, right? That I think we don't talk a lot about, like how we're constantly sort of, at least that's something I'm fascinated by. Tyson used to say, "Mom, not only are you staring, but your mouth is open." I'd be like, but I'm so fascinated, right? Like by the body and by interactions and like what are people saying and what's going on, and you know, how like we can assign stories to that, right? And she talked about, she wrote this, she wrote Caroline and for Violet on the same day, and she'd had like some red wine. And she talked about, she says, I was taken back to when I first started writing at 7 or 8, where I'd write these very observant and very character-based short stories. And this argument that she's writing about was a real thing. She'd actually seen it on a street in Oxford. And she only saw a really small snippet of it. But I think, you know, when we talk about liberation and like radical imagination, like part of that is about latching on to very small nuggets of things, right?
Yes.
And like, you know, like a dandelion seed, you know, like these really microscopic images of what could be. And Arlo does that, right? Yeah. And she takes this 30-second interaction she sees with this couple, this voyeuristic moment, and she blows it up into Caroline, right? And into something that now is reverberating in each of us, like all the way across the pond, we're having a conversation about that moment. And she said, she found herself wondering all of these things, like, why was their relationship exploding out in open like that? And what had caused it? And did the relationship end right there? The idea of witnessing a relationship without context was really interesting to Arlo. And so the lyrics were just kind of coming out of this stream of consciousness. And she says that the harmonies were also important and were inspired by the Beatles' This Boy, which is interesting because you were hearing, you were hearing the 90s, but
my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh wow. I mean, like, I mean, how can you even escape the Beatles, especially not when you're, you know, contextually situated in in England, you know, like that's incredible. Right. Oh wow. I was actually, having like that same conversation with our dear friend Nola earlier today. Kind of, we were talking about poetry and like the blocks that we'll hit, and kind of how sometimes all it takes is just kind of like one line from somebody else's life, right? Like a song or a poem or a piece that they've wrote, or even just like, you know, this 30-second interaction that you're witnessing on the street, and making up, you know, like what kind of, you know, the answers to those questions that you're still asking yourself. I mean, in a way, it connects to me again back to the Collapsed in Sunbeams opening poem. And she has these lines. I see myself sitting beside you, elbows touching, hurt and terribly quiet. And again, like, I think she does this incredible job of like painting this picture, right? For like, I can imagine, you know, these, I can feel that feeling of sitting next to somebody in that kind of like hurt, that intimate loneliness, or, you know, yeah, so almost like social isolation when you're in that same space even. And then as soon as I heard those lines in my mind, I started to tell like, what's the story, right? Like, what led up to this, in like this specific moment of her and whomever this person is, you know, like theoretically a lover or somebody who's at least close, right? That they're having this kind of moment where they're touching but still aren't like, you know, touching.
Come on now, we done all slept in the bed next to that
Come on.
listen, and you be feeling some type of way. Even though when you got listen, when you partnered up, you said we're not gonna go to bed mad. You went to bed mad.
Right.
But also, I mean, you know, yeah, like I think that I remember for myself, even when I was preparing to get married, like one of my points of anxiety was that I really didn't know any, like in close proximity, I didn't know any couples that I would deem like the aspiration for my marriage, right? Like folks were, and I was really afraid of like not having the roadmap. And of course, you learn that there is no playbook and there is no roadmap. But I remember actually like examining, like, okay, they've been married for 50 years, but they can't stand each other. They were only married for 3 years, you know. They like, you know, like they don't even sleep in the same room. They, you know, like, and just being like this whole piece, which I think Arlo points at, is this like love and pain, even in the construct of the relationship that is there too, and how lonely it can get in those spaces. And I think if you could even tie together like all the things, like how when we're unwell in our spirits, you know, right, for ourselves, then we can't be fully present in our partnerships, right?
That's
then
Black
we
Dog.
can't be, right? That's Black Dog. We can't be, yeah. Is I love what you said, that we get a lot more time with her. And speaking of time,
I know.
this is dope.
Like, oh.
Let's take a pause and see, like, I don't know, let's try on this kind of interactive thing for a sec and see if people would, one, like, want to share a bit about their reflections on Arlo's work, or maybe a little bit on the conversation we've had.
And folks, I think it would be easiest for us if you can, at the bottom, there's like a reactions at the bottom of your Zoom screen. There's a reactions. And then if you click that, there's like a little raise hand. And we'd be able to see if somebody has something that
like that. Is that what you mean?
No, I think that, well, on my screen, there's one that like says raise hand even there. And you don't have that, Yo?
I don't have that.
All right. Well, if you can, you know, put up some kind of.
Yeah, anything. Let us know you want to talk, even this.
So, you know, I mean, Yo, while folks are getting a little off of or
hold on, Drew just came off a video. I think we got somebody. I think we got a taker already.
Oh, Drew,
come on, man. Come on in.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Oh, good to see you, bro.
I just realized that my video wasn't on the whole time.
Well, you look very comfy. Are you
yes, you do.
I'm just in my little room here. Yeah, very comfy. No, I love you guys, and this has been so cool to see people, you know, listening in, and just to hear you, you know, talk about these works. So just wanted to say what's up.
Oh man, appreciate you, bro. Drew and I go all the way back. Like, like Matt Nahan back. Like he was saying.
I'm tripping. Why did I feel like I owned the Matt relationship and like y'all been rocking for a long time? Jenny, what's up? Thanks, Eleanor.
I just love all of this right now. So like I mentioned, I listened to all of her works last night. I was just dancing all night. But for me, I think about like what she reminds me of first off, because that kind of creates like a comfort area for me. And what I liken it to in terms of like some of my favorite musicians. So like I was feeling Leon LaHavis, I was feeling like Radiohead for sure. And like those things kind of always put me in this space. But the one thing that I really, and I'll just share the track, and I'm looking at the lyrics too, but it was Just Go.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily the lyric. I mean, the lyrics were great, but I love the fact that it was kind of a more upbeat, like I'm working through these things. But at this point, this is what I want to say. And it's almost like I'm working it through in a positive way for me. I just need you to go. And I need you to hear this. But I have so appreciated her just being able to express herself in a way that everyone's like, I really get it. And as a songwriter, I've gone to a couple retreats and I asked a songwriter a question like, so when you were saying this phrase, were you saying this? Is that what you meant? And they were like, is that what you think it meant? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, so yes. So it was a matter of, it was like a matter of interpretation, but he was like, well, we were thinking this, but again, that's how you are processing those things. There's not necessarily a wrong response. But I really like, Yodit, that you put up the link for the Genius link, so you could see what some of those things she was like working through. And I'm like, oh, but listening to some of her older works too. But Black Dog and Just Go, but Bluish. Bluish is probably my favorite.
Bluish.
Yeah. Bluish is my favorite one.
I mean, okay, Jenny, because you brought those up, like we got to talk about them real quick. That feeling that you were talking about with Just Go, right? I latch onto that completely because it has such a, like the beat is funk. That bass line is a funk bass line. You know what I'm saying? Like that, and yet at the same time, she's talking about like this painful interaction, with somebody who's kind of coming back into her life. And I think that you could probably answer this question for me, but I wasn't sure listening, right? If she was writing about a relationship that, like a loving relationship, or it could also be, like I interpreted it also as like a parental kind of relationship, where she's talking about, like you came back with your hair dyed silver. And that kind of, I was like, oh, is that a metaphor for like all of the time that's passed since you kind of saw your parent or whatnot? But man, like that feeling of holding both like the joyous bounce of that beat, right, with like that feeling of like, get out of here. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to see you dip.
Listen, I did not have these healthy boundaries that Arlo has at 20. Let me just tell you. So she was like, at 20, she's like, this is a lot of experiences with toxic people distilled into one song. And she wanted to talk about the idea of getting negative energy out of your life. I think at 20, I was like attracting negative energy. And she said this, here she is again, like, she said, I wanted a breakup song that said simply, no grudges, but please leave my life.
Right.
Right? Like,
And then, okay, and
right,
then.
Sherman? I'm like, I'm coming up on 50, still trying to figure out how to get the toxic people out.
but for Jenny to bring up also Bluish then, right? Oh, yeah. Which is that, again, it feels to me like a song that's holding the tension, right? Because first of all, shout out to the Afro-Caribbean beats that, made their way into this song. Love that. But then, right, like the instrumentals are seductive. This is not, and that's the thing, is like the song is about her getting that hey girl, what you doing text at 2 a.m. And she's like, no, thank you. Like I told you once, I shouldn't have to say it a second time. And yet you can feel that like desire, right? Is still, it's there. She's holding the boundary, but you wouldn't be putting that Sade inspired Afro Whiz Kid beat in there if there wasn't something stirring, right? You know, so the connection, I think, like between those different boundaries and the ways that, right, like we set them or don't, is so strong. And it's, I feel like another aspect of this whole mental health conversation that she's just kind of like opening up with us, right? Without
that
like,
track was so dope though. I mean,
it's so good.
Oh, it's so, okay, can you play a very little bit of it? I just put a link in it. It's
Come on.
so, come on.
Come on.
Listen. Having been single for a little while, I'm gonna need some of y'all to stay out of my DMs.
There it is, folks. PSA.
And then I'm gonna start replying with bluish.
Do it, yo. Do it. Oh my gosh, right? Like that, there's no way that you put that instrumental together for this song if there's not something in there that still is like, damn, you know, I want this, but you were not the right fit, and I gotta just stick to it. Deuces. Come on. Oh, love that. Love that. Yo, we talked about my favorite song. We heard from Jenny. What's your favorite track on this album? Do you have one?
That was it. I mean, yeah, I think I didn't share this when you showed me, when I saw your favorites, but they were essentially mine as well. But Bluish, the combination of, like, I think we've been talking a lot about power and agency, right? And I have, like, what does it look like to build that? And not power over, but power from within, right? Like we can't empower other people. We have to become empowered, and that, like, and you know this because you've helped me a lot, like standing in the truth of our word, having boundaries, you know, having the agency to create and to craft our own narrative, right? And I felt Arlo doing that throughout. And I meant what I said. Like, I think, I remember there have been I'm beginning to work on a memoir, and part of it is like thinking about how that sense of agency or self-empowerment was so fleeting. And when you get to the point in life where I am now, you know, and I remember elders saying that, like, that there's this beauty of the rites of passage that we don't celebrate anymore, you know, that the kind of unfurling into our highest purpose, into who we're intended to be. In that process, you know, I wanted to, like, when I was little, I wanted to be an adult. When I'm an adult, I want to be little, you know. And so it's such a gift. But what I loved about Bluish is that we get a right, we have the right to say at every stage, like, that's enough, you know, that's enough. And to hold for ourselves that truth. And I love that. It's very, I guess it's what I hope Black Dandelion will be broadly, which is, and what Arlo offered us was, and what music in general, you know, you said this earlier, like, you know, I think about Marvin Gaye, you know, and how he was, you know, so instrumental in our healing and in our struggle, and really the play, you know, the backdrop to that, and how Kendrick has been that for us recently, and Arlo is for that in other ways. But I hope that this will be a space where we can use music and arts and the culture for healing, right? And examining that. And so again, to see this young Black woman-bodied human, you know, offering this gift to us, I received that. and I receive it in this particular rite of passage that I'm in, you know, the elders will say, you know, by 40, you like kind of give a F, and by the time you get to 50, you give 2 Fs.
Right.
I see Lisa's head nodding. I feel that coming on. And I'm glad Arlo got it a little bit earlier.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Man. I mean, like, I think, you know, folks have said being a woman of color is in and of itself an act of resistance, right? And I push back on that only in that so much of us, all of us, has been conditioned to be not our full selves. But when we are our full selves, right, like the way that Arlo is on this album, that is indeed an act of resistance to see, you know, her normalizing, right? Because that's what it is. When somebody has that platform and shares what she shared in the way that she does, it is a normalization of so much here, right? Normalization of non-hetero relationships, a normalization of the ways in which, you know, Black bodies can and want to be fulfilled, right? And so much. Obviously, we've talked a lot about mental health, right? And we didn't really get into Black Dog and For Violet so much, but, you know, those songs are very on the nose. I think, you know, you don't have to like do a lot of searching to kind of get what's going on there.
Yeah.
But really just, you know, again, talking about the ways in which, you know, our society, and particularly like the younger generations, are dealing with these levels of depression and anxiety that we have not reconciled in the past. And then, you know, also in For Violet, right, just touching on briefly in probably like the span of 2-3 lines, she says, you know, something about him, right? And so I'm, you know, the interpretation is Violet's dad, right? And she asks, like, you know, if he knows how he's been hurting his kids, right? Which, you know, she talks about like his charm and whatnot. But I think that that's a nod to, you know, like the ways that patriarchal structures, right, and expectations have distorted the ways in which men are in touch with our own humanity, right? And so like normalizing all of these conversations that we don't have, you know, often, I think, you know, it's that step forward, right? And that is the resistance, that is the revolution happening right there.
She said For Violet too was inspired by Rhodes by Portishead. I'm not familiar with that song, but she was imagining being in space or being in a desert with everything silent and you being alone. Like, it's dark, it's deep, it's gritty.
Yeah.
You know, the song covers moments of growing up when you realize that the world is a little bit heavier and darker than you first knew, where your innocence gets broken down a little bit. And I think we've talked about her. She's clearly had some lived experiences, right? She's wise beyond her years. And she said it's a story about those big moments that you have to weather in friendships and asking how you help somebody without over challenging yourself.
Yes.
Which is
right.
huge,
Again,
right?
huge, a whole nother boundary, a whole nother, like, come on.
No.
Is she best friends with Brene Brown? I don't understand, like, how, you know, but man, shout out there.
So you asked this prompt that I think would be, and I just told our friends, like, we just doing this. I dropped our Venmos and our Cash App. If like folks want to send us some love, we appreciate that. We'll probably do this soon again.
Yeah. probably in another couple weeks. Like we said, we're trying to, we set 25 as the goal. So give us a little time to see what is coming up, what's percolating, what's in the culture in the moment. And then I think, this time works for me, yo. So we might generally.
That's right. You're gonna do it. It's Black Dandelion Church.
Come on. Come on.
Hey, bro, if this album, I'm going to ask everybody this, and I want to start with you. It's a question a prompt you offered. If this album was an article of clothing, what would it be? And y'all can drop in the chat if it were article of clothing.
Yeah.
And if you haven't listened yet, that's okay. Like, given what you've heard, what would it be? What article?
So, I don't know if folks can kind of see what I'm wearing, but this is it's kind of like a sweater, a bit of a sweater. It's got like some button up on a collar. So it's comfortable. It looks a little snazzy. My mama got this for me, I think. So,
All right, Mama Jones.
She always has me looking great. She's amazing taste, but it's warm, and it feels like home. And I think that is what this album, it feels like a hug, like a sweatshirt, what we Michigan folks love to wear on those cold fall days, right? Like the sun is shining, but it's still like 45 degrees. So put that hoodie on, friend.
Sort of like today, except I think
yeah, except it's like 2 degrees outside.
Yeah.
But
somebody said it felt like a chunky knit dark orange sweater, a soft cuddly robe I'm wrapped in and dancing.
Yes.
What's that?
What about for you? What does it feel like?
So it felt like candle burning. It felt like sage.
Yes.
It felt like crystals, like that's what came to the altar of this space with me. It felt like this piece of coral Tyson and I found when we were traveling. It felt like this shirt. Let me see. Can I show you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rosa and Polly and Angela and Shirley and Yodit.
It felt like over my shoulder.
Yes, Black excellence.
Yeah, that's
fun. Yes, yo.
Yeah.
Shout out for the Ibeyi Botanicals candle there.
Right. That's your people.
That's my cousin Josh Rodriguez coming through.
See that? Protection.
That is. Yes.
Support them. We said we were going to do that. So pronounce it again. Ibeyi.
Ibeyi.
Ibeyi. IBEJI Botanicals and Spiritual Goods. There it is, if you would like to see. And we should support this business.
Absolutely. Please do. Please do.
The candles are spectacular, and there's good juju in my house.
Yeah, that's, it really does clear out the spirit, clear out the energy, and kind of like help with that regrounding. And my wife dropped the link in the chat.
Thanks, Liz.
Much appreciation.
I think Liz should be our wife, considering how much she shares, how generous she is with you.
Hey, it takes a village to raise a will.
Listen, Liz, we love you. Liz is like our #1 champion. She blows us up. You hear me?
Yes, much gratitude. Well, folks, this has been the dopest. I've had so much fun. Thank you all for tuning in, joining with us.
Right.
Like we said, we are trying something out. We're practicing, and so we're really eager for the feedback. Let us know what works. Let us know what we'd like to try, and then of course, if there's other stuff. I mean, obviously, I'm listening to new music every day, so. I've got some thoughts on what we can cover next, but I would be so excited if you reach out and share, anything that's kind of like coming up for y'all, any cool media, any cool music, just send it my way because I'm looking constantly.
I think they can post in the event too, Well, for right now, until we like set up a platform, if they
Okay.
post in the Facebook event that you did, then that way everybody can see it and we can
Yeah.
vibe off of each other, you know?
Yeah.
So if you've
Yeah.
got some ideas, drop it in there for a little bit until we get a page set up. Listen, 25 people showed up to the very first
Fun.
of many episodes of Black Dandelion with Will and Yodit. What?